Hi friends, today we are here to analyze an action thriller movie Next, directed by Lee Tamahori. Nicolas Cage plays the main role in the movie. This movie centers on the hero who has the ability to foresee the future. This movie was inspired by the novel, The Golden Man, and has some similarities to the Malayalam movie Air the Great. Without much lag, let's get into the movie. It was 8:09 in the morning. Our hero Chris can foresee the future for 2 minutes. He foresees a lady entering the restaurant, but when it was sharp 8:09 in the morning, no lady was entering the restaurant at that time. Chris felt sad. Every day he goes to the restaurant to see the lady at 8:09 a.m., but he couldn't find her. He realized that he could foresee the future more than 2 minutes, in the case of this lady. In the next scene, a magic show is going on. Chris is actually a magician. While he was showing magic to the audience, he calls out a foreigner and interacts with him. In between, the two police officers, Callie and Kavanaugh, were watching him from the audience. Kavanaugh asks Callie if this was the person to be caught, and tells her that he would become a headache. While Chris was showing the magic, Callie thinks for some time and somehow got an idea about Chris's ability to foresee the future, but she was not sure about it. Chris then goes to a casino and engages in a gambling game. He wins every game. During this time, the chief executive officer of the casino enters the CCTV room and notices Chris. The officer tells the owner about Chris and says that he might be winning every game through his tricks, as he is a magician. The owner looks at Chris through the camera. Suddenly Chris looks back at the camera. The owner instructs every security to catch him, but Chris, who had already foreseen this, stops the game and goes to the counter to receive his money. As he stands at the counter, he foresees a scene. A man with a gun hidden in his dress comes to the counter, points the gun, and threatens the accountant to give him all the money. When a security officer comes to stop him, he shoots the security and the accountant, and escapes with all the money. As Chris visualized this scene, the actual man with the gun comes to the counter. Chris, who knows about the gun he has hidden, suddenly grabs the gun from his hand, but the security officer who came there mistakes Chris and thinks that he is going to kill someone. Even though Chris told them that it was the gun that he grabbed from another man, they didn't believe. Sensing the problem, Chris suddenly runs and enters a bathroom. Security officers were following him. He changes his clothes from the bathroom and grabs a hat from an old man. He then runs out of the casino and escapes in a car. Security officers couldn't catch him. The chief informs the police that someone stole the car from the casino. The police trace the car number and chases him. In between, Chris foresees a scene of a train hitting his car while crossing a railway track. Keeping that in mind, he raises the car's speed and passes the railway cross just before the train's arrival. The police couldn't catch him and got stuck waiting for the train to pass. At this time, Callie shows the video of Chris escaping from the casino to the police commissioner. Callie was telling the officer that Chris could help them to find the terrorists who stole 10 tons of nuclear weapons. When the officer doubts it, Callie somehow convinces him and gets a time period of 5 days to find out the terrorists. Callie then tells Kavanaugh to bring the chief security officer. At this time, Chris enters his uncle's garage with the stolen car, and when his uncle asks him if it's a new car, Chris tells him that it's a stolen one. Later, Kavanaugh brings the chief security officer to a secret place of the police officers. When Callie inquires about Chris, the security guard replies that all he knows about him is that he's a magician. He also tells them everything that happened in the casino. Meanwhile, in the garage, Chris and his uncle was having a conversation. Uncle, who knows about the power of Chris, advises him to forget the girl for whom he was waiting, but Chris tells him that one day that girl would come to that restaurant at 8:09 a.m. He adds that he would never leave the city without meeting her. At this time in the police secret camp, Callie, with the help of a computer expert, finds out that Chris could foresee the future for about 2 minutes. Also, Kavanaugh informs her that they track the car's location. They decide to meet him. By this time in the garage, Uncle questions Chris about the speciality of that girl that kept him waiting for so long. Chris says that usually everything happens within 2 minutes after he foresees it, but he couldn't find that girl, even though he foresaw her. He adds that he could see his future for more than 2 minutes if she is with him. In between their conversation, Chris foresees Callie coming to the garage. Callie comes to his place and tells him that she needs to talk. Uncle goes out by giving them space. Callie asks him if he could foresee the future, but Chris said that he couldn't. He also adds that what he showed in the magic show was all his tricks. and is not connected to any type of foreseeing of the future. But Callie tells him that they need his help in finding the terrorists who robbed the nuclear weapon. Chris immediately said no to them. Callie then threatens him by telling the incident that happened in the casino and informs him that they could even arrest him. Chris, without thinking a bit, tells her that the gun was not his and that he grabbed it from a man who was going to kill the accountant and the security. Callie caught the truth from his mouth and asks him to help them, but Chris was not ready. Suddenly some other policemen came to the place and surrounded him. These are those scenes that Chris saw in his future. Keeping this in mind, he escapes from the garage after informing his uncle. As soon as Callie reached, Chris had already escaped. In the next scene, the chief security officer was going to the parking area. There he sees a man and a woman. On seeing the officer, the man asks him if he could give them an interview. When the security officer denies giving the interview, the man asks him about his relationship with Chris. The security officer gets angry on hearing this. Suddenly the man shoots him in the leg and threatens him that they would kill him if he didn't answer their questions. That man was the terrorist who stole the nuclear weapon. His name was Smith. The next scene shows the restaurant. It was 8:09 a.m. and Chris was waiting for the girl. That day, the girl actually enters the restaurant. Chris felt surprised. Her name was Liz. He was eager to get to know her. He foresees the chances of how she would react if he approached her. Suddenly a man comes to her. From their conversation, Chris understood that the man was following her throughout, telling her that he loves her. Even though she tells him that she is not interested, he still follows her. Suddenly that man holds her hand. Chris foresees the reaction of the girl if he interferes. Finally, he goes to them and asks him why is he holding her hand. The man asks back who he is to interfere. Then he began to slap him, and Chris didn't react back. Liz gets angry at that man for slapping Chris. She tells him to leave. After he left, Liz helps Chris to sit in the seat. She introduces herself, and when Chris tells her that it hurts in his mouth because of the slap, Liz tells him that she would accompany him to go to the dentist. He agrees and then they heads to the hospital. On their way, they get to know each other. Later, Callie and Kavanaugh arrive at the restaurant and ask about Chris. One of the workers of the restaurant informs them that he regularly visits the restaurant, and today he went out with a lady. Callie asks if the restaurant has a camera, but the answer was no. Then Callie and Kavanaugh discuss their pressure they have for catching the terrorists. Callie then instructs Kavanaugh to find his location. The next scene shows a harbor. In one of the ships, many boxes were put together. Some people opened one of the boxes. It was the parts of the nuclear weapon. They are the ones who stole those. They fit each part of the weapon. Smith, along with two others, was observing this. One of them was the producer, who agreed to bear the cost of the weapon. They discuss about Chris. The producer asks him if the chief security officer whom he caught yesterday knew anything about Chris. Smith replies that he has no idea about Chris. He adds that the police are also searching for Chris. When Smith questions Chris's power, the producer reassures him that it is true, that even the cops are looking for him. Meanwhile, Liz stops the car on their way. When asked about it, Liz tells him that she teaches the tribal children once a week. They both go to school. When one of the children doubts Chris as Liz's boyfriend, she corrects them by saying that he's just a friend. Chris also shows magic to the children. They then leave. On their way back, Liz asks him if he's a magician. He smiles and says that he knows little tricks and magic. In between, Kavanaugh informs Kelly that they had gotten information about Chris and asks her to come fast. The next scene shows a rainy night. Liz and Chris were in the car, and Chris was driving the car. They suddenly notice that the road is blocked. One of the workers alerts them about the flooding on the road and tells them to turn around. By this time, Liz and Chris sitting in the car have been caught on camera. Callie and Kavanaugh examines the footage and finds the car number. Callie tells Kavanaugh to track the car number. In between, Liz and Chris take a room to spend the night. Since there was only one bed in the room, Chris tells her to sleep there, and he would sleep in the car. By this time, Liz has gained a good impression over Chris. Following that, Kavanaugh tells Callie that Chris and Lisa might have stayed somewhere since the road was blocked the day before. At that time, the commissioner calls Callie and informs her that they have got signals from the nuclear weapons. He also instructs her to track the location and catch them. One of the officers tells her to make a team and attack the terrorists, but Callie tells them about its risks. If the terrorists attacks back with the nuclear weapon, she tells them that it would cause danger to the entire nation. When the commissioner asks about her plan, she tells him about Chris. She also adds that they are going to search Chris, and after that, they could attack the terrorists. Later, the police go in search of Chris. Someone from the terrorist group was observing this, and he suddenly informs his team. A lady among the team tells that they should catch Chris before the police, then shows a romantic scene between Chris and Liz. They are still at the resort. By this time, Callie along with other police teams comes to the resort in a helicopter. They make a plan to surround the resort with their force. This time they were so determined to catch Chris. By this time, Callie notices Liz coming out of the resort. She was going for shopping. The terrorist team also notices Liz. Suddenly Callie goes near Liz and tells her that she is a police officer and that she needs to talk to her. Liz then enters Callie's car. Callie then shows Liz the video of the incident in the casino. She then tells her that Chris is a psycho and that he was trying to kill a man in the casino. Then Kavanaugh gives some tablets to her and tells her to help them to catch Chris. He instructs her to give the tablet to Chris so that he would become unconscious and that they would reach there soon. Liz asks them why can't they catch him directly, and Callie tells her that he would escape as soon as he comes to know about them. Later Liz comes back to the resort. He was going to take a shower. She was tensed, sensing that. Chris asks her if anything is disturbing her, but she said no. She tells him to take a shower. As he went to bathe, she makes juice for him and gets confused about whether she should put the tablet or not. By this time, Smith and his team were waiting outside the resort to kill Chris. Liz puts the tablet in the juice, and when Chris was about to drink it, she suddenly stops him and reveals everything. She apologizes to him and tells him that she trusts him. Chris thinks for a moment and exchanges the juice. He goes outside and drinks the juice. The police were watching him through a camera, and he makes them believe that he drank the juice with the tablet. Chris then tells Liz the truth about his power to foresee the future. At first, she didn't believe it. Then Chris changes the TV channels and tells the upcoming dialogues. Then the same dialogue comes in the channels. Liz finally believes and asks him what the police want from him. He says that they need his help for finding a terrorist group. Liz asks him why couldn't he help them. Chris tells her that if he helps them for once, they would seek his help for every other operation, and adds that he doesn't like that. Then Chris gives her a letter and tells her to read the letter after some time and do the exact thing as told in the letter. He then leaves. Callie watches Chris through a binocular. She observes him getting out. There was a big chasm between Callie and Kavanaugh. He suddenly jumps into it and runs. The police were behind him. At this time, as per Chris's letter, Liz starts the car and jumps from it. The car hits a tank and then falls into the chasm. Like a landslide, rocks and stones start falling into the chasm. The police get scared, but Chris was so cool. As he reaches the bottom part, Callie was waiting for him pointing her gun. Suddenly several wood logs start falling towards her, and Chris saves her. They get stuck under the logs, and the police come and help them. They then arrest Chris. Smith and the team were watching this from a far area using binoculars. Smith then instructs someone to kidnap Liz. As per Smith's orders, someone in the team kidnaps Liz by pointing a gun towards her. The next scene shows the police station, where Callie was questioning Chris about the reason why he was not ready to help them. Chris tells them that they would use him for every operation if he agrees to this one. Callie tells him that it's for saving the nation, and she turns on the news channel and shows him the news. Chris foresees every upcoming news. The first news was about an upcoming cyclone in the city, and the last news was about Liz being kidnapped and tied on a chair. Suddenly the chair gets destroyed as there was a bomb fixed to it. Chris gets shocked by seeing the news. Callie asks him what did he foresee. Chris begged them by saying that he needs to go. Callie, on realizing that he won't tell the truth, instructs the officers to put him in jail. The police puts him in jail, but he fights with them and somehow escapes. Callie, on knowing this, follows him. Chris runs and finally reaches a building. Callie also comes to the place and asks him why did he come there. Chris says that he needs to stop Liz from being killed. Callie tells that she would help him to save Liz if he helps her back, then shows a building, which is next to where Chris and Callie are. A killer was waiting there for Chris. He sees Chris and suddenly shoots him. Chris dies. The killer calls his boss and tells him that he has killed Chris. Suddenly the police arrive there and kill him. Callie then tells Chris to stop acting like dead. Actually, this was the plan of Chris, to find out the team behind the killer. Callie then asks Chris what would happen next. Chris tries to foresee the future. He sees Liz being tied in a van. He notices the number plate of the van and tells Callie the number. Callie suddenly informs the team to track the number. The police tracks the number and heads to trace the van. Another team goes to the place of the terrorists to catch them. A fight occurs between terrorists and the police. Liz somehow escapes from the van. Chris helps the police by showing the place where each of them has hidden, and also gives information about the weapons in their hand. In between, Smith finds Liz and points the gun towards her. Callie tries to save her, and finally Callie kills Smith, and Liz gets back safe. Then Callie asks Chris about the future of nuclear weapons. He then tells her that he did a mistake. When Callie asks him about the mistake, He said that it would happen now. Suddenly a cyclone that was alerted in the news happens, and everyone dies. But this was all that he foresaw. Actually, he was in the resort with Liz. This was proof that he could see his future for more duration. When he is with Liz, he knew that if he escapes from the police and then helps them, they all would die in the cyclone. So he suddenly calls Callie and informs her that he would help her. He then tells Liz that they would meet someday, and then he would explain everything. He then leaves to help the police. He knew that if he helps them as soon as possible, they could escape from the cyclone. The movie ends there. Hope you like this interesting movie. We'll be back with yet another amazing movie. Until then, goodbye.